In this video, we're going to look at pivot tables. And the whole key here is to always remember that a pivot table is a table. It's an Excel table. Now, the power of a pivot table, it's a special type of table that's formatted in such a way that it allows you to perform complex and powerful summarizations of data that's within a table. Once again, you can look at a table and make all types of calculations just by using your mouse. So before we begin, let's take a look at our information. Okay, we're on the sheet pivot table, but the key point here, for any table, that top row are your field names. Those field names describe the information within the various columns. So right now I'm clicked on date, and within this column there should be only dates. If there aren't dates, or if there's a text entry or possibly a numeric entry, your table will not work properly. Your pivot table will also not work. So once again, the key component is the field names. And within the field names, they have to be formatted properly. And those field names describe what's in the columns. Looking here, we have the field name sales. And within that entire column are numeric entries listing the various sales by date. Within this column, within the field name sales, I can't be typing in a date or a name or whatever. Within this field name sales, there should be only numeric entries. We have the field name manager. Within this column, there's going to be text entries for the various names of managers. Within this column or field name, you cannot have dates entered or numeric entries. It should only be text entries. So once again, what's determining everything are the field names. Any table, the most important part of a table are those field names, which allow you to not only sort your information, but also filter the information or data within that table. Okay. We're going to take this data from this table and then turn it into an Excel table. And once again, at the moment it's a table, but it's not an Excel table. What I usually do is I place my cursor directly underneath the field names. So the field names are right here. My cursor right now is in cell A2. I then hold down the Control key and tap Control T. I get a dialog box that's asking me, do I want to create a table within this range? And you have to make sure that you always have a check mark here. My table has headers. Click OK. And what you're going to notice is that now we have an Excel table. My field names all have the drop-down arrows, which will allow me to filter that table and also sort the table. I'm going to name that table Pivot. Hit Enter. So I've now named my table. It's called Pivot. The next step is to click on the Insert tab and then click here for Pivot Table. I want to insert or create a new pivot table. I get this dialog box here, which is telling me that my pivot table will be based upon the information in that table that I just created called Pivot. I have the ability to create the pivot table either on a new worksheet or an existing worksheet. I'm going to leave it on a new worksheet. So next I'll click OK. And we get a new dialog box. The key components, once again, as we've already mentioned, a pivot table is a table. And all tables are made up of field names. And in this box right here, we have the various fields within our pivot table. Now, in order to work our pivot table, all we have to do now is to take these various field names and drop them into one of these four boxes. The boxes being filters, rows, columns, and values. The values box will, as a rule, contain fields that can be summarized numerically. So once again, we're going to be taking those field names and dragging them down into one of the four boxes here. I'm going to begin by taking the field name, date, and dragging it into the rows box. After doing that, you can see now that already Excel has taken that date and broken it down not only into the date but also the months involved with the associated date. So that's kind of listed here. But more importantly, when you come on to the actual sheet, you can see for your rows right now, you have the various months. If I click here to open up what's in January, you can see the one specific date of January 1st. February 1st, there's one date here. So that's our first step. I'm going to close that back out by just clicking on it. And the next thing I'm going to do is I want to show not only the months but also the years associated with the dates and also the quarters. And I mean, this is tremendously powerful. Once again, we have a very small table with only about 40 or 50 entries or records. We could do this with a table with as many as 1 million records. I mean, how it would work is that once again, we've dragged down the date field and placed it in the rows box. If I want to also show not only the months but in the date, but if I want to show in addition the year and the quarter, all I have to do is click on that field and then right click. Come down and click on Group. We get a new dialog box which is telling us that our table has information starting at the date 1/1, going all the way up to 10/2/2017. That's pretty powerful and very useful. That said, I want to be showing not only the days and the months, but I also want to show quarters. So I'm going to click here, and what I recommend always is to click on years. So you always want to be grouping by the years within your pivot table. What that does is that in the event of your table, and many times it will, if it includes dates within multiple years, you don't want to have all your information just dumped within a month. You have to have a way of specifying the month and also the year. So once again, what you always want to do is when you come to grouping your dates, you always want to click on years. But I'm also going to show quarters in addition to that. Click on OK. You can see now it's broken out the information where we're showing the year, the quarters, the months, and also the individual dates associated with the data. It's very, very powerful. what I'm going to do next, and I mean, this is once again, now we're getting into the real power of a pivot table. The ability to take those various field names, and once again, you can see here that by grouping, we're now showing not only the date field, but Excel has created new fields called months, quarters, and years. They're all listed right here. They're also listed up here. But just with the mouse, I can rearrange this information. I'm going to click here for years and move it up to filters. So it's showing up here now. So we can filter that information, where if in fact we had multiple years, we could come in here and then just click by year. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take months and move them up to the columns area. So once again, now what we're showing now are the various quarters, the individual dates, and the months. It's pretty powerful. Now, we just have basically dates that are showing and various ways of looking at dates. What you want to do is really kind of come up with some type of summary. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the field name sales, click on it, and drag and drop it into the values box. The values box is very important in the sense that any type of numeric data, 99% of the time, should be dropped into the values box, which allows us to summarize that data or the various values. We can sum the information, we can average the information, we can perform a standard deviation, all types of possibilities. What you can see right now is that the pivot table now is showing us various summaries for this data, the various sales, and it's giving us a summary by quarters, by individual day and date. Right now, there might be, especially if you had a very large table, you might say, well, I don't really want to show the individual dates. And I mean, that's not a problem. I could come up here and unclick the dates, but the easiest way of doing it is by highlighting the date and drag and dropping it right here. So I just dropped it right out of the equation. So I took date, hold down the left mouse, and I dropped it, dragged and dropped it outside of the box. So it's a little bit cleaner. We have our various quarters. We have our months going across. Once again, looking at this pivot table here, when you look up in the top, we have this designation of row labels and column labels. It's kind of self-evident that the row labels would appear to be referring to quarters and columns are months, but sometimes it's not that readily apparent. What I recommend always, once again, the key component of any table is to know what your field names are. And in order to make those field names visible, what you do is you click within your pivot table, click on the Design tab, come over here to Report Layout, and then click on Show in Tabular Form, which means show as a table. Now our field names are appearing, and they are self-evident. Quarters here, the months going across. So we know what the data stands for. So our field names are now showing. What we did, Design, Report Layout, Show in Tabular Form. In order to formulate the numbers within our report, or formulate any type of information, but it's usually the numbers, you click on one of the numbers within your pivot table, right-click, and then click on Numbers Format. And I mean, that's very, very important. You don't want to click on just plain Format Cells. Now, I can show you what will happen doing it the wrong way. We click on Format Cells. I want to format it in terms of currency. Click on OK. And what happens is that only one of the numbers are formatted. Okay? The correct way of formatting the numbers within your pivot table is to click on one of the cells, right-click, and then click on Number Format. And once again, you want to click on Number Format. Then you can come over here for Currency. Change the decimal places if needed. Click OK. But the key component here is that everything is now formatted in the currency format, not just one cell. And if we start changing that pivot table around, all the numbers will continue to be formatted properly. Once again, the ease of changing things. I can come up here to months, drag and drop it here, and this is what it would look like, which is not a bad way of showing the data. Take quarters, drag and drop it up here, and once again, we're just using a mouse. Tremendously powerful. We have the various months, and what months the months are corresponding to. If we want to get it back to the way it had been appearing, where we have quarters in our rows and months going across. We could click here and then group and drag and drop these fields. We can take store, drag and drop it to rows. So we have the various stores and what their sales are by the various quarters, which is a real powerful way of looking at that data. So the whole key is that we have this pivot table, and it just becomes a question of dragging and dropping these various field names into one of these four boxes. Next thing we're going to look at is this idea of a slicer. Okay, and a slicer allows us to filter the data. And it makes it very easy for a person to come in and just change the various what-if possibilities. So we can click on the Analyze tab, click on Insert Slicer, and once again, the slices are just the field names. So you can choose whatever way you want to slice and dice that data. I'm going to choose the slicer or field name quarters. Click here, click OK. I'm going to move my slicer over to the right. I can click on quarter one. Right off, we're just showing the quarter one information. Quarter two, quarter three. Get rid of our various or clear our filters. Now we're back to showing everything. Quarter one, quarter two. If I want to show multiple quarters, I can hold down the Control key. So now we're showing 2 and 3. If I want to clear those filters, just click right up here. So it's a tremendous way of changing your data, and it makes it very user-friendly for a manager or whoever is looking at your data to get various views of the information that's contained within your table. Keeping in mind, once again, we have a very small pivot table based upon only a few records, but it would work the exact same way if you had 1,000 or 10,000 or 20,000 records. The key is to have a clean table, making sure that the tables are set up properly where the field names, if it be a date, only has dates in that field name. If it's sales field name, you should only have sales or numeric quantities within it. Thank you very much.